And I know that. But it's one of those things that, hey, Mr. Boggs, we're in a crisis situation. What are you doing? And so if he doesn't do anything, you criticize him. And if he does do something, you still criticize him. I know the spotlight is on the school. The school is under a microscope, the administration, the teachers, and it's not fair. It's not fair. I've traveled 50 states and 48 countries with my work with teenagers and parents and teachers. And never in my career have I ever seen a school, staff, administration, teachers care so much about your kids. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, I think what they're going through is not healthy. Because I see some administrators saying, we can do more. And I'm not sure they can. I see some teachers crying and say, Jeff, you don't understand what we're going through. And so I have to talk to this teacher and say, hey, you need to let go a little bit. You can't own this. But if you can come every day and continue to do your job and inspire these kids and encourage these kids and motivate these kids and challenge the kids, discipline the kids, then you're doing your job. But then the kids walk out these doors and they go home to you. And so I want to ask you, what are we doing? As parents, what are we doing? I'll tell you what, I'm leaving tonight and heading back to Chicago. I'm not worried. I am not worried about your kids. I'm worried about some of your teachers because they're personalizing a lot of this. And I don't want them to. Your high school kids are resilient, they're fun. That girls' basketball game last night was one of the highlights of my year. I just wish Ann could hit a free throw. I met some of your, and I hear all over the world, oh, Jeff, teenagers today. You guys have awesome kids. And I'll tell you what, when I come into a school, and I've been in so many of them, within the first minute or two, I can tell whether I'm going to like the school or not. And so as I'm walking away tonight, I'm thinking to myself, would I want to send my kids here? If my kids can have some of the teachers that I've met, I'd want all my kids to go here. I have 5 daughters that I like most of the time. Don't laugh. It's not like you like all your kids all the time. I have 2 biological daughters and I've got 3 adopted daughters. My 3 adopted daughters, about 21 months ago, their father died. And I'm proud of who they are. Matter of fact, this past summer I said to Peyton, we were having lunch up in Pennsylvania. She came on a speaking engagement with me. She's 16 years old. I said, Peyton, how do you stay so positive? She said, my daddy would want me to have it any other way. I said, that's right. Now I have 2 biological daughters. I want to tell you a little bit about them. My oldest daughter, Tori, she's 23 years old. She's a dancer in New York City trying to make her way on Broadway. I'm proud of her because this is a journey that ain't easy. But I remember her junior year of high school, we sat down and She wasn't involved in sports. She wasn't involved in extracurricular activities. She didn't have a job. And I'm thinking, I pay the car, I pay the insurance, I pay the cell phone. She shops at Abercrombie and Fitch. I pay the money. She gets $50 a week in allowance. What's wrong with this picture? I sat her down and said, baby, I said, we need to talk. She says, about what, Dad? Well, first we're going to talk about the birds and the bees. No, Dad, I know all about it. Well, we're still talking about it. Object A, object B. Jiggle, jiggle, things happen. She's like, Dad, this is too much for me. I said, we're going to talk about college. Where do you want to go? You want to go to big school, small school? You want to go north, south, east, west? Where do you want to go? She said, Dad, I'm gonna think about it. I know you are. A couple weeks later, she comes home. She's like, Dad, I figured it out. I'm like, what's that? Why are you late? They're like seniors from high school. They just ignore you and walk right on by. I love it. Your kids come home late, we're about to beat them. We have a program at 7 p.m. You're like, I'll just show up when I get there. Sure, expect your kids to do what you're unwilling to do of yourself. Oh, yeah. I should probably stick to my script. Thank you for coming. So my daughter says, Daddy, I figured it out. I said, what's that, baby? She says, I'm not college material. I was like, I know. So was I going to push her to go to college? You know, I've come to think that I'm not sure if the price of education today is worth the value. Sometimes I think wish my daughters sometimes would think about maybe staying home, going to community college, staying invested, wanting to learn, get a job, suffer, struggle. Oh no, Jeff, we don't want our kids to grow up and have to go through some of the things I had to go through. I want to protect them. Why? I want my kids to be challenged. So she's in New York City working as a dancer, trying to figure things out. And let me tell you something, it takes courage to do what she's doing. She gets up, she goes to auditions, she gets rejected. She comes home, she cries, she thinks about it, she gets back up the next day, she goes and she auditions, she gets rejected, she calls me, she's hysterically crying, I'm laughing, we have a great conversation. I mean, it's not that I'm necessarily laughing at her, and I am. But I remember she had come home, 22 years old. She's like, Dad, like, when am I going to have my break? Really? You're 22 years old and you're wondering when you're going to have your break? Overnight success takes 15 to 20 years. And I asked the kids, do they have the courage to do the little things that other people aren't willing to do? Do they have the courage to put the time in every day? And I think what we need to do, instead of giving our children this false sense of entitlement and telling them you're special, and they are special. Your kids are special, but they're no more special than any other child. But they're special to you. They're your special. But this false sense of entitlement that we give our kids is affecting them in a negative way, because they start thinking, the world owes me something. World owes them nothing. And you agree, right? Has the world ever just given you something? No, you work for it. You don't show up in a new job. Hi, I'm here. I should get paid today, right? No, you go and you work. It went for 2 weeks. I got work 2 days and you're going to pay me? That's right. You have to work for it. And some of you were asking, my kid's 28 years old and he's living at home. He's living in my basement. He's got a master's degree, but he can't get a job. He won't even go to McDonald's. And he's laying there 2 in the morning in the basement, sitting on a beanbag naked, eating Fritos, watching late night television, asking, why did my life turn out? Because the kid don't know what it means to struggle. I'll ask him, what do you want of your children? Jeff, I want my kids to be happy. I want my kids to be good. And then I want my kids to make good choices, and I want them to have a good attitude, and if they make good choices and they have a good attitude, they're going to be happy. Well, Jeff, what does all this have to do with what we're going through? It has a lot to do with what we're going through. I stood before you kids the past 2 days and I told them about me a little. I was abused as a child. My mom and dad are both alcoholics. I grew up and I graduated high school 128 out of 133 students. I was rejected by 16 of the 19 colleges that I applied to. Grew up with a learning disability, a stutter, a twitch. My dad's been a drunk since Vietnam. And if you would have asked me 6 months ago, hey Jeff, did you ever have a male role model, a good male figure in your life? I would have said no. My dad just got out of alcohol rehab for the first time in his life. And I'll tell you who my hero is now. My dad. My dad's been sober since like the end of October. It was Labor Day weekend, I think September 2nd, 3rd. We had a big dinner at my house. My mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother. I made a big honking prime rib dinner. I make good prime rib. And my dad said he wasn't coming. He was drunk. I said, don't come then. But my dad came and he was loud. That's my dad. So that night, about midnight, they got home. My mom called about a half hour later, hysterically crying. She says, you need to come over now. I got to my parents' house. My dad had taken the gun and threatened to kill the whole family. I called the police. My dad got arrested. The next day, my dad remembered none of it. I sat down with my dad. I said, you promised me. You promised me that you can't stop drinking on your own, then you promised me that you'll go and get help. And you know that I said that I'll do it with you. And Dad says, I know. I said, then you need to keep your word. Next day, nobody could find my dad. About 12 noon, my dad called. I said, Dad, where are you? He said, I'm down in Wilmington, North Carolina. I decided to check myself in. I said, why didn't you let me go with you? He said, nope, I got to do this on my own. And every single weekend I was down there to support my dad. You see, ladies and gentlemen, something about mental health. It's not an individual thing. My dad, 2 tours in Vietnam. My dad was orphaned as a child. My dad was shot down in a helicopter. My dad worked as an air traffic controller. When 9/11 happened, he was the supervisor of all the Northeast airspace. He's the one that had to call timeout and shut it down. My sister was a flight attendant, and her son Patrick, who has autism, woke up that morning and was flipping out. And for some reason, my sister said, I can't